Hey guys, so I thought I'd change things up today and do a video, and I wanted to talk to you about something that I hear all the time from young professionals trying to break into healthcare sales, people just like you. And one of the things they realized during the interview process is that you're going to be competing against people with years of experience, sometimes even decades of experience, calling into the same customer with the same type of product and the same geography. And if you don't have any experience, that can be really intimidating and sometimes even depressing. But there's one skill set that I have found most millennials possess that's really missing in Generation X and Y, and is something you have to highlight during the interview process. That's coachability. So I want to talk to you about somebody who wasn't coachable. So about 6 weeks ago, I got a LinkedIn invite from a guy named Brian. And Brian had been in pharmaceutical sales for 16 years. He was actually a pharmacist by trade. He had called on the same geography, the same physicians for all 16 years in different classes of trade, meaning he called on community-based practices, he called on hospitals, he even called on payers. And when you looked at Brian's resume, I mean, it was amazing. This guy had done it all. It was what every pharma company is looking for. But there was a couple red flags when I looked at his LinkedIn profile that made me kind of question whether or not he was the right person for my team. And so I'll give you the three mistakes that he made. So the first mistake he made was he sent me a generic LinkedIn invite. You know the ones I'm talking about that says, hey, I want to add you to my professional network. There is never a time when you should send a generic LinkedIn invite, especially to somebody who you don't know or that you're asking a favor of. Take the time to look at the person you're trying to connect with's profile, find something you have in common, and then reference that in the invite. Real simple. So that was mistake number one. Mistake number two was Brian used his LinkedIn profile as his online resume. It's anything but. LinkedIn is about building an online reputation. What I mean by that is most healthcare salespeople will craft the content, the words on their LinkedIn profile as if they're trying to get a new job. They're gearing it towards the hiring manager, towards recruiters, or towards human resources. When in reality, you have to craft your messaging towards the customer. Because think about it, your customer's gonna check out your LinkedIn profile. And if you have things like I'm a quota crusher, or a hunter, or a 5-time President's Club winner, if you're the customer, do you want that person calling on you? So if I'm the customer, do I want to be hunted? No. And Brian made his LinkedIn profile all about him and his accomplishments. So that was mistake number two. Mistake number three was it was all about Brian. He brought no value to me. What I mean by that is after I connected with him, he sent me a LinkedIn mail, and he sent me this email that was like crazy long. It was a dissertation about everything he has ever done, every accomplishment, every skill set, his entire work history. And after I got done reading this email, I counted 31 times Brian referenced himself, and only 4 times did he reference me. That ratio needs to be flipped. If you're asking somebody for something, you've got to take the time to research them, to know their business, and then talk about their successes and how you can possibly pepper in your skill sets into their organization, not making it all about yourself. So those are the big 3 errors that I saw in Brian's LinkedIn resume or LinkedIn profile. So I sent him a message back and I said, hey Brian, I'm sorry that you're in this position. I'm empathetic. I've been in that same position before, and it's scary when you've got kids and a family, but I've got a couple suggestions for you. So the first recommendation I made was to check out medreps.com. Medreps.com is an online job board specifically for healthcare sales professionals. Pharmaceutical sales, med device, diagnostics. The caveat to MedReps is that you have to have at least 2 years of experience. So if you don't have experience, don't waste your time going to MedReps. But it's a paid site, and if you've got some experience and you're looking to change careers, change jobs, it's a great place to go. So that was my first recommendation. I said join that, pay for their service. The second recommendation was because his profile was really kind of lacking, it wasn't optimized. I had written a blog post in the past, and I sent him the blog post, and I sent him an infographic that I put together, and it had 8 key steps to creating a killer LinkedIn profile. So I said, read this infographic, make a couple changes, tweaks to your profile, and you're going to get a lot better response on LinkedIn. The third recommendation I gave him is my 5x5x5 rule. And this has to do with LinkedIn groups. So if you're not familiar with LinkedIn groups, these are groups that you can join within LinkedIn where people with common interests or common jobs will go and they'll talk about all different types of things. So there's a healthcare sales group, there's a med device group. I mean, it'll get really niched and you'll have med devices in northeastern Texas, and it'll just be all med device reps and managers in the northeastern Texas region. So it's a great place to go where you can start to connect with people with similar interests. My 5x5x5 rule is if you pick one or two groups and you go in and you post 5 times a day, 5 days a week for 5 weeks, 5x5x5, your profile will skyrocket to the top of the search criteria. So when somebody searches, healthcare sales professional, you will pop up to the number 1, number 2. You'll be on that first page of all the healthcare sales professionals out there. And the reason for that is because by engaging in groups, you're seen as a thought leader, as a real professional. And even if you're not providing info, if you're just asking thoughtful questions, it helps your profile. I did this myself, and it was amazing the number of recruiters that were reaching out to me with job opportunities simply because I was engaging in some LinkedIn groups. So those are the 3 pieces of advice that I gave Brian. And didn't hear anything back from him. 6 weeks later, it was actually yesterday, I get an email back from Brian. It's the same exact email that he sent me 6 weeks prior. He literally copied and pasted the dissertation and sent it to me again. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, he didn't take any of my advice. I looked on his LinkedIn profile. He didn't make any changes. So I sent him a response. I said, hey, Brian, thanks for reaching out. Curious, of the 3 pieces of advice that I gave you, which did you implement? Right? Which did you implement? So he responds back with this. Yes, I went to your MedRep site. It's not my site, but I went to your MedRep's pay site, and now my email account is full of advice. I'm thinking what he did was he signed up for their newsletter and he didn't pay for the service to be able to see all the different job opportunities. So that was miss number 1, not being coachable. Number 2, he says, I viewed your blog, which is well written. That's it. That's all he says. He viewed it. He didn't make any changes. He didn't make any changes to his LinkedIn profile. Okay. Then he goes on, so that's number 2, not being coachable. Then he goes on to tell me he has over 4,000 LinkedIn connections, and he has joined hundreds of groups with key opportunity talent managers. Now, I don't know what a key opportunity talent manager is, but what I do know is that LinkedIn limits the number of groups you can participate in to 50, not hundreds. And when I looked at Brian's profile, I could see in his profile, he didn't engage in any conversation. 3 pieces of advice, and Brian took none of them. So Brian goes on to tell me, he says, I need somebody who's willing to help other than give advice. And the fact is that I'm not going to help you until you start taking some of my advice. So here's what I learned about Brian. He is selfish. He's the type of sales rep that will come in. He's going to hit quota because it's all about Brian, but he's not going to deliver value to the customer. And what I care about as a sales leader is I want people who continuously deliver value to the customer, because that'll keep that customer a lifetime customer, not a one-hit wonder. So why do I tell you all this? Because Brian is the guy you're competing against for these jobs. And while yes, he's got great experience and tons of knowledge, the guy doesn't listen. He's not coachable. But that is the skill set that you bring to the table. And managers, hiring managers, know that this is extremely important to finding the right candidate. Here's the kicker. After I talked to Brian the first time and right before I received his follow-up email, I had an opportunity that came up on my team, and I was looking for a pharmacist with Brian's exact experience and the exact contacts that he had. But Brian's not going to get an interview because he didn't take any of the advice that I gave him, despite being overqualified for this job, because I would rather have a coachable candidate than somebody who comes in and knows it all. So that's all I have for you today. Below this video, there's an infographic. It's got the 8 killer steps, or the 8 steps to creating a killer LinkedIn profile. Download that, tweak your LinkedIn profile, and keep fighting. I'll talk to you next week.